Today we're going to talk about some video games and books that you might enjoy if you like them. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris, and today's video is all about video games and maybe matching an indie or self-pub book to your favorite video game to see if you might like to jump into that series. I've been inspired recently after a chaotic sort of mood reading few months to really get back to my indie and self-pub roots. It's a thing that I'm very passionate about, and I love to promote indie books on the channel. So hopefully you'll be seeing a lot more indie content coming out in the coming weeks/months. So for today's video, because a lot of us also like gaming or versions of gaming, I do not myself claim to be a gamer of any kind. I like casual gaming and some of like my favorite ones from my youth which have made their way into this list. But a lot of us do like to get really in depth with that form of escapism. I think gaming is a fantastic way to really experience a story, particularly for readers who aren't necessarily visual readers. It gives you that visual medium and just gives you a lot to look at and experience in more of a real-time scenario. But that being said, the reverse is also true. So a lot of gamers do also enjoy reading for that sense of escapism and that sense of adventure. And a lot of those people tend to be fantasy lovers. I know that I am. So I'm hoping today to go through some games that are relatively popular, maybe some showing my age a little bit, but to give you some examples of books that you might like if you enjoy those games. So let's jump into it. If you are someone who likes the game Horizon Zero Dawn, for example, with maybe elements of Tomb Raider, I know I really enjoyed the newer trilogy Tomb Raider that came out. I played the first one to completion. I am also not a completionist. I tend to play games and then get bored about 20 hours in. Tomb Raider, the first one, I've played about 4 or 5 times the whole way through. I have started the second one, which I think is set in Serbia, and I don't know how far I got into it, but I've started that one twice, and I've recently started the third one. I got about 5 hours into it. But I really liked the idea of survival in Tomb Raider. I'm talking about specifically. I've watched my wife Rachel play Horizon Zero Dawn, and that I love the big creatures and the combat. So if those two combined, Horizon Zero Dawn and Tomb Raider, were to be in a book form, that would be The Last Ranger by J.D.L. Rizal. Now I'm talking to the point where we even have like caches with hidden items in it throughout the world that people have to, well, this ranger has to go and find to collect goods. It gave me such a sense of adventure. It was colorful. It was the Titans in this book. I'll try and find some artwork of the Titans. This is the Kickstarter edition that I have in my hand. Here's the big turtle from the book there. It's just fantastic, and it's super immersive, which is incredible. And if we look at the naked hardback, it does have this also printed on the naked hardback. So if you're someone who likes someone like an adventure game, which does have a storyline which you follow, but also has an element of adventure and stealth and needing to complete tasks along the way, then you're going to have a good time with The Last Ranger. The next one I want to showcase is a game that I've not personally played. I am interested in playing like the 8-bit pixelated version, which is not the version my wife is interested in, and that is going to be Final Fantasy. She grew up on those games and she absolutely loved them. When we first got together, she was playing through Final Fantasy X, I want to say, and she was completing it. She was 100%ing that game, and so many hours of her life were sunk into it. But there are books that pull inspiration from Final Fantasy. One of the series that I'd like to talk about today, sorry for the wobbly camera, is going to be The World of Lunaria by L.L. McRae. So a lot of people don't know that this pulls inspiration from Final Fantasy. Now there are a few other series I could go and talk about that also do that, but another one that I do want to highlight here is Bastion by Phil Tucker. Now, the reason this one reminds me of Final Fantasy is for that progression element and also the fiends and beasties that you come up with along the way. I'm talking about that real grindy feeling of having to level up, to persevere, to go through the landscape, to go to different towns and settings, and just being able to work your way through it as you progress, because each area also gets more difficult. So if you like that sort of progression game, that's probably more of the 8-bit older versions. I'm not sure about the more modern versions, but there are two recommendations that I can give you if you like those versions of Final fantasy. Now, the next one is going to be one that is going to age me, which is Pokemon, the original series. I'm talking the original 151 Pokemon, the Pokedex. I used to have one, it was real chunky. It's like this big, and I used to carry it around. Anyway, I was a nerd as a kid. A lot of us were. That's fine. It is what it is. But there is actually a series which is based on Pokemon, and that is the Jakua, I think it's pronounced, series. Correct me if I'm wrong, team, in the comment section, by Travis M. Riddle. And the first book of this is called On Lavender Tides, which we'll put up here. Now, I've not read this one personally. I'm very interested in it because I was a Pokemon fiend. As a kid, I used to ride my bike and pretend I was riding a Rapidash all over the yard, which just tells you more about my childhood than you really need to know. But I had a great time with Pokemon as a concept. I'm very excited to get into a book. Now, I know this one reads more to the YA side of things because the game was, for that audience as well. But I'm looking forward to picking that one up. And if you liked Pokemon, you might like it as well. Now, the next game is one that I have actually sunk more than 200 hours into, and don't judge me or judge me, I don't really care. It's called Stardew Valley. Now, this is a very casual farming game which has things that you can complete. So it has tasks that you need to complete. It does have a storyline which spans for 2 years, but basically your grandfather calls you and says that you can escape your city life and you can go into the farmhouse that he's left you in his will. And it's you building up that farmhouse and learning how to make money, become friends with the townsfolk. There's a lot of farming games that are out there now, but Stardew Valley is one that is very dear to my heart. If you're looking for more of a casual style, very cozy, with elements of that accomplishment, that I would recommend something like the Hidden Dishes series by Tao Wong. Now, this is a series which starts with the Nameless Restaurant. This is super cozy. It is just a book about the love of food, and you follow this chef and this restaurant as people come in to eat at this restaurant, and you basically go through the dishes as they're being cooked and the love that comes into the dishes here. But you also get snippets of Tao Wong's other work, which is kind of caused a whole bunch of Easter eggs in this. So it's cozy, but you can tell there's more to this author's work by just those little snippets that have been put in. And it reminded me very much of Stardew Valley, where you've got just a very casual gameplay, which you don't necessarily have to sink too much time or brain power into, but there's more than meets the eye, which I would couple those two up. Now, if you are someone who grew up in the Halo generation, which I did, personally, I can't really play first person, that gives me motion sickness, but I had a lot of friends and a lot of nights with friends where we would play multiplayer Halo and I would just tap out when I felt sick. But the book that reminds me a lot of this gaming franchise and of people who liked Halo might like this franchise is a hard sci-fi called The Iron Truth. Now, this series is called The Primaterie or The Primatere, depending on how you pronounce it. I could have pronounced both of those wrong, by S.A. Tholen. And they have this is a beefy, hard military sci-fi, but it isn't super hard to get into. I really enjoyed this one. There's a lot of heart, there's a lot of character development, but it is very much a hard military sci-fi. Some very cool tech in this game and aliens and things like that. So you've got little bits of horror elements, a lot of military, some cool tech. If you liked Halo, you'll probably like The Iron Truth. Now, this next one gets compared a lot to books that you could potentially read if you enjoyed it, and that's going to be The Ghosts of Tsushima. Now, this one I have seen compared to reading something like The Sword of Kaigen. That seems like the easy pick for this particular game. This is another one that I've watched Rachel play. It is beautiful, age-inspired, military-esque. The combat is quite difficult from what I've seen, or maybe she was just playing a difficult setting. I don't know. I enjoy watching her play video games more than playing them myself. So the easy sell for Ghost of Tsushima is going to be The Sword of Kaigen, but I feel like this one is pretty well known. So I wanted to give a couple of recommendations of books that may be lesser known in the indie sphere. So I'm going to be recommending people pick up Sister Samurai. Now, this is a lot lighter than Ghost of Tsushima, but we are following another Asian-inspired, anime-inspired, that Ringlight is loving this cover, fantasy book. And this is a badass mama bear who just wants to get home. She doesn't have time for anything that she has to deal with, but the fighting style is really cool. It's super short and just very, very enjoyable. If you like Ghost of Tsushima, you may enjoy Sister Samurai. The one that I've seen my best friend play with his best friend is called 7 Days to Die. This is a survival game. It is dark, it is based around zombies. I got scared just looking at it, but it did really remind me of a book that I read recently called Three Rivers Plagues by Zachary and Joshua Forbes. I'll pop the cover up here. I read this one during the SPSFC competition in 2023, and I had a blast with it. Now, it can be a little bit slow in places, but if you like that sort of dark, gungy survival instinct, these are a group of people who are just trying to survive an outbreak of what they call hunches, which are very similar to zombies. There is a lot of, I would also maybe go down the route of COD, the Call of Duty, the zombie one, where people are just trying to survive, and it's just, there are zombies everywhere, and that very much reminds me of Three Rivers Plague. So if you like those sort of things, those darker, grittier games where you've got to run away from zombies, then Three Rivers Plagues is probably going to be up your alley. The next one I have for you all is if you liked Skyrim. So my generation very much grew up with Skyrim. I personally was not a fan. There was too much of things to do, but I did enjoy parts of The Witcher. So these two sort of come hand in hand. If you had something like Skyrim, or if you like something like Skyrim, and you liked something like The Witcher, you may enjoy a series called the Fallen Light series by H.C. Newell. This has all the makings of those classic fantasies. It's got a bunch of different species in it. It feels like we're going on side quests. We've got a main storyline. We go off on different parts to progress our characters, and we very much learn with the characters as they go and do all of these things. It has something to look at every page. It's fast-paced, it's action-packed, but you are always moving towards something that you want to know about, which very much reminds me of those type of games. So in Skyrim and The Witcher, there's a lot of side quests, a lot of things that you can go and do, and it feels like this book. There's always things happening around in the world, even though we're following our group of people on a main sort of revenge quest, if you would like to call it that. But if you like Skyrim and you like The Witcher, you may enjoy the Fallen Light series by H.C. Newell. Now, the next one I'm going to recommend is a game called Fable. I grew up with Fable. You probably gathered that. I grew up with a few of these by now. So Fable 2 and Fable 3 are still some of my favorite games of all time. These games had a heavy traveling aspect where you're traversing the world and you come across some beasties or demons, and you have to just sort of survive. And that reminds me very much of Blood of the Spear. This opening scene is a trial, and this reminds me so very much of one of the trials you have to do in Fable. If you are someone who likes questing, or someone who likes traveling in your fantasy with the world that opens up and really expands throughout the storytelling, which happens in Fable as well, you're probably going to like Blood of the Spear by Mark Timoney. This book gives me mad Fable vibes, and the reverse of that is true as well. When I play Fable, which is one of the things that I do replay from time to time, I really get the urge to read this book. And the last one I have today is a little bit left of field, and it's going to be a horror-based game called Alan Wake. This is a game based in nightmares, if I'm remembering correctly. I think the second one has come out fairly recently, but fairly recently in my world is within the last 5 years. But Alan Wake, I remember playing the first one and just being on the edge of my seat. It was so suspenseful. I felt like I was having a panic attack every time I picked up that game. And no book has done that to me except for Icebreaker by Stephen William Hanna. This is a book I will keep recommending as long as people will listen to me. It has probably got the best tension in an indie and self-pub book that I've come across. And it's just, I couldn't put it down. I was so anxious for the people in this book, but I also couldn't stop reading it at any point. And that feels like you're trapped in a nightmare, like Alan Wake. But those are some video games, and if you like them, you might like those indie books that were recommended during this one. I hope people are enjoying this series. I do have a bunch of them to come out. If there's anything in particular you would like to see, please let me know in the comments down below. I've got about 5 of these planned at the point where if you like this, try this indie or this self-pub just to get back to those indie and self-pub roots. If you like the content, give it one of those. And if you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will, and I will catch you in the next video. Ciao.